On a quiet afternoon in Beirut, thousands of pagers suddenly vibrated in unison. Instead of delivering routine messages, these devices unleashed a coordinated wave of explosions across the city. This was no random malfunction, but a meticulously planned intelligence operation that turned everyday communication tools into synchronized weapons. The event signaled a new era in covert warfare, where technology itself could be turned against its users with devastating precision. September 17, 2024, at 3:30 p.m. local time in Beirut, Lebanon. In bustling markets, private homes, streets, and government buildings, thousands of pagers vibrated simultaneously. Hezbollah fighters picked up their devices expecting normal messages, but instead, a coordinated wave of explosions rolled through the Lebanese capital and surrounding regions. In just a few seconds, nearly 3,000 pagers detonated almost at once. The explosions were small but devastating at close range. People clutched their thighs and chests as devices exploded in their pockets. Blood soaked their shirts and pants. Cries echoed through the markets. Emergency services were overwhelmed within minutes. Beirut hospitals simultaneously received hundreds of casualties, many with serious injuries to their hands, faces, and abdomens. The first wave of explosions killed 12 people. More than 2,800 were wounded, many critically. The Lebanese government declared a state of emergency. Hezbollah's communication network collapsed instantly. Commanders could not contact operatives on the ground. Coordination between units ceased. Panic spread through the organization as members realized their trusted communication system had been turned against them. Within hours, intelligence agencies worldwide reached a unanimous conclusion. This was not a random failure. It was a carefully planned, complex operation requiring penetration of Hezbollah's supply chain, modification of thousands of devices with military explosives, and remote detonation with pinpoint accuracy. The operation bore the unmistakable hallmark of the only intelligence service in the world, with the capabilities, boldness, and motivation to execute such a complex task, Israel's Mossad. But how were ordinary communication devices transformed into synchronized weapons? How did one penetrate so deeply into the logistical chain of a terrorist organization that thousands of operatives unknowingly carried bombs for months? How was simultaneous detonation coordinated across an entire country without leaving evidence that could survive the blast? This is the story of Operation Green Beeper, the most sophisticated supply chain infiltration operation in intelligence history. An operation that required years of preparation, penetration of international business networks, and technical innovations that turned consumer electronics into precision weapons. An operation that demonstrated Israel's global reach and its willingness to strike enemies in ways that rewrite the rules of modern warfare. To understand the reasons for the success of the pager attack, one must understand why Hezbollah rejected modern smartphones in favor of technology that is decades old. This decision was driven not by nostalgia or technical backwardness, but by a calculated response to Israeli intelligence capabilities, which had proven incredibly effective against Palestinian militant groups. By the early 2020s, Hezbollah's leadership recognized smartphones as an unacceptable security vulnerability. Any modern phone is essentially a tracking device, constantly transmitting its location through cellular networks, GPS signals, and Wi-Fi connections. Israeli intelligence had repeatedly demonstrated its ability to track targets via their phones, intercept communications, and use phone data to coordinate drone strikes and targeted eliminations. Hassan Nasrallah, Hezbollah's Secretary General, ordered a complete overhaul of the organization's communication infrastructure in 2022. He issued clear instructions that senior members must completely abandon smartphones. This directive was mandatory. Compliance was monitored by internal security services, and violators faced disciplinary action. The logic was simple. If Israeli intelligence could not track their messages using modern technology, it would have to rely on human intelligence sources, which Hezbollah believed it could control through counterintelligence operations and internal vetting. Pagers offered clear advantages for an organization operating under constant surveillance. These devices use radio frequencies, not internet connections, making interception more difficult than with cellular or data transmission. They receive messages but do not transmit location data that could be used for targeting. The technology is simple enough that complex malware designed for smartphones could not infect the device. From Hezbollah's perspective, returning to 1990s technology represented a security upgrade, trading convenience for operational security. The organization entered contracts with international suppliers to purchase thousands of pagers for distribution among its members in Lebanon, Syria, and other operational zones. Purchases were made through front and intermediary companies to hide Hezbollah's direct involvement and comply with international sanctions prohibiting direct sales of technology to certain terrorist organizations. The supply chain included manufacturers in Taiwan and Hungary, distributors across Europe and the Middle East, and logistics companies handling delivery and transportation. Each link in this chain provided an opportunity for intelligence penetration if an adversary had the sophistication and patience to exploit these vulnerabilities. The Israeli intelligence community had tracked the evolution of Hezbollah's communications for years. When signals intelligence showed the organization switching to pagers, Israeli intelligence recognized both the problem this created for surveillance and the exceptional opportunity for offensive action. If Israel could compromise the pager supply chain, it could turn Hezbollah's security measure into a weapon that thousands of operatives would willingly carry, convinced these devices protected them from Israeli surveillance. The operation to turn Hezbollah's pagers into weapons began several years before the explosions in September 2024. Israeli intelligence agencies, primarily Mossad, with support from military intelligence and special operations units, embarked on a comprehensive infiltration of the international logistics chain that would ultimately deliver pagers to Hezbollah. The goal was not immediate. Israel was playing a long game, investing years in building infrastructure that would allow them to strike at the opportune strategic moment. The first phase required precise identification of the suppliers Hezbollah used to procure its communication devices. Israeli intelligence employed human sources and signals intelligence to track procurement patterns, monitor financial transactions, shipping documents, and message exchanges between Hezbollah representatives and potential suppliers. They identified the Apollo Gold, a R924 pager, manufactured by a Taiwanese company, as the primary model chosen by Hezbollah for its communication network. This choice likely reflected a balance between cost, reliability, and availability. Moreover, Hezbollah purchased through European distributors, not directly from Asian manufacturers, to maintain operational security. Once Israeli intelligence identified the target supply chain, the next phase required infiltration. This was not simply intercepting shipments and replacing devices. Such an operation would have been immediately detected when modified pagers arrived and failed basic security checks. Instead, the operation required introducing modified devices into the legitimate supply chain in a way that they passed all verification protocols and appeared identical to genuine products. Later intelligence sources reported that Israeli operatives established a front company in Hungary that positioned itself as a legitimate distributor in the pager supply chain. The company operated openly, conducted real business operations, paid taxes, and maintained all appearances of a legal commercial enterprise. Its actual purpose was to provide Israeli intelligence access to the physical supply chain, allowing them to intercept genuine pagers during distribution, modify them, and return them to the chain without raising suspicion. The technical challenge was extremely difficult. Explosive devices had to be small enough to fit inside the pager's casing without significantly altering its weight or appearance. They had to remain stable during transportation and normal use, not detonating accidentally from impacts, temperature changes, or electromagnetic interference. They required a reliable detonation mechanism that could be activated remotely via a radio signal, distinguishable from ordinary pager messages by a specific detonation code. And they had to carry enough explosive force to be lethal at close range, while minimizing collateral damage to bystanders who might be nearby during detonation. Israeli weapons engineers, likely working at secret facilities within the Ministry of Defense's Research and Development Division, developed explosive charges using PETN, penterythritol tetranitrate, a military-grade plastic explosive with an extremely high detonation velocity. PETN is stable under normal conditions, but can reliably detonate from an electrical charge. The amount of explosive in each pager was small, probably between 10 and 20 grams, but sufficient to cause devastating injuries when detonated near the human body. The explosive was molded into thin sheets to fit inside the pager's battery compartment, masquerading as part of the device's ordinary components. The detonation mechanism was no less complex. Engineers developed a printed circuit board that looked identical to the pager's ordinary electronics, but included additional components capable of recognizing a specific radio frequency signal. When the pager received the designated detonation code, a message indistinguishable from ordinary pager traffic to anyone intercepting communications, the modified circuit would deliver an electrical charge to the PETN, causing instant detonation. The system was designed with multiple safeties to prevent accidental detonation, ensuring that only the precise detonation signal would initiate the explosive sequence. Manufacturing these modified pagers required a secret facility where Israeli technicians could work undetected. Each device needed to be carefully disassembled, the explosive components precisely installed, and the pager reassembled without visible traces of modification. Quality control was critical. A single pager that failed to detonate on command or exploded prematurely would jeopardize the entire operation, alerting Hezbollah to the compromise of their communication devices and forcing them to abandon pagers before Israel could execute the attack. After modification, the weaponized pagers were returned to the supply chain through the Hungarian Front Company. They were packaged in the manufacturer's original boxes with proper documentation, serial numbers, and all signs of legitimate products. Hezbollah procurement officers received exactly what they ordered: fully functional pagers that worked perfectly for their communication purposes. The devices functioned normally for months, reliably delivering messages, showing no signs of compromise, passing any verification protocols Hezbollah applied to confirm their security. The infiltration extended beyond the initial pager supply. Intelligence sources indicate that Israeli operatives also compromised radios and other communication equipment used by Hezbollah, applying similar modification methods to multiple device types to maximize the operation's effect. The goal was not merely to temporarily disrupt Hezbollah's communications, but to destroy the organization's entire communication infrastructure with one coordinated blow, requiring months or years to rebuild. The psychological aspect was equally important. After the attack, every device carried by Hezbollah operatives became suspect. Replacing pagers would require not only acquiring new devices, but developing entirely new procurement protocols to verify that replacements were not also compromised. The operation was designed to sow paranoia at every level of Hezbollah, forcing members to suspect their equipment, their suppliers, and possibly their colleagues who distributed these devices. By early 2024, thousands of weaponized pagers were distributed throughout Hezbollah's ranks. The organization had no idea that the security measure they implemented to protect against Israeli surveillance had turned every member into a potential attack victim, waiting only for the moment Israel decided was optimal for execution. The decision to detonate the pagers in September 2024 reflected both strategic timing and operational necessity. Israeli intelligence tracked escalating tensions along the Lebanese border with Israel, where Hezbollah forces were conducting increasingly aggressive operations in solidarity with Hamas during the ongoing conflict in Gaza. Israeli military planners assessed that Hezbollah might be preparing for broader military actions capable of opening a second front against Israel, forcing the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF, to fight simultaneously in Gaza and southern Lebanon. The weaponized pagers represented a strategic asset that could be used only once. After detonation, the element of surprise would be forever lost. Hezbollah would immediately abandon all pagers and implement new security protocols that would significantly complicate similar supply chain infiltration in the future. Israeli decision-makers faced a dilemma: wait for a more strategically optimal moment, risking that Hezbollah might discover the compromise before Israel could use it, or execute the operation immediately to preempt Hezbollah's military preparations, and disrupt the organization's command structure before it could coordinate major operations against Israel. Intelligence assessments indicated that Hezbollah's leadership was planning significant military actions, possibly including missile strikes on Israeli cities and cross-border raids that could escalate into full-scale conflict. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant received briefings from Mossad Director David Barnea and IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi, outlining the strategic rationale for immediate execution of the pager operation. The argument was simple. Decapitating Hezbollah's communication network would create a narrow window of operational chaos during which Israel could launch additional strikes against Hezbollah's infrastructure, weapons depots, and command posts, while the organization was unable to coordinate effective responses. Final authorization was obtained from Israel's Security Cabinet in early September 2024. The decision was classified at the highest level, known only to a narrow circle of senior political and military leaders. Even within Mossad and military intelligence, operational details were strictly compartmentalized. Most personnel involved understood only their specific part of the operation, unaware of the broader plan or execution timeline. The detonation date was set for September 17, chosen based on intelligence indicating that many Hezbollah operatives would be in densely populated areas rather than forward military positions, maximizing the operation's impact on the organization's command structure and communications personnel, who were most likely to carry pagers. Israeli planners calculated that simultaneous detonation during daytime hours would catch operatives during routine activities when they would be least prepared to respond to a sudden attack. Technical execution required simultaneous transmission of the detonation signal across all of Lebanon, reaching all compromised pagers regardless of location. Israeli signals intelligence units, likely operating from a monitoring station in northern Israel and possibly from aircraft or drones positioned for maximum radio coverage, transmitted the coded message designed to activate the explosive charges. The signal was crafted to appear as an ordinary pager message, ensuring operatives would hold the device or have it nearby when detonation occurred. Exactly at 3:30 p.m. Lebanese time, the sequence of detonations began across southern suburbs of Beirut, the Bekaa Valley, Sidon, Tyre, and dozens of other locations where Hezbollah had a presence. Pagers vibrated simultaneously. The message appearing on screens was brief, perhaps just a set of symbols or a short phrase designed to attract attention without raising suspicion. Operatives reached for their devices. Many pulled pagers from pockets or belt holsters to read the message. Others already held the device when the message arrived. Then the explosions began. The detonations were not powerful. Each pager contained only a small amount of explosive, much less than a hand grenade or artillery shell. But the devices were designed to be worn close to the body, maximizing the impact of even a small charge. When a pager detonated in a pocket, the explosive force was directed into the thigh, groin, or abdomen of the operative. When held in hands to read the message, detonation destroyed fingers and caused serious facial injuries from shrapnel and blast waves. Casualties were immediate and catastrophic. Operatives fell on streets, markets, in homes and vehicles. Blood pooled around bodies. As bystanders rushed to help, many did not initially understand what caused the sudden explosions. The simultaneous nature of detonation immediately overwhelmed emergency services. Ambulances could not reach all casualties quickly enough. Hospitals received hundreds of wounded within the first hour. Their emergency rooms were filled with patients suffering traumatic injuries requiring immediate surgery. Lebanese television channels broadcast chaotic scenes from across the country. Markets where explosions occurred showed blood-stained asphalt and scattered debris. Hospitals displayed corridors filled with wounded men, many in characteristic Hezbollah military attire, receiving treatment for injuries to hands, faces, and lower bodies. Family members gathered at emergency rooms, awaiting news of loved ones caught in what initially seemed like a coordinated terrorist attack before the truth emerged that the explosions were not external bombs, but weaponized communication devices. Hezbollah's official response was immediate but confused. The organization issued a statement confirming the attack on its members and promising retaliation against Israel. But the statements lacked the usual specificity regarding tactical actions or operational planning. The reason was simple. Hezbollah's command structure was in chaos. Senior commanders could not communicate with field units. Operational planning required coordination between multiple levels of leadership, all of whom used compromised pagers. The organization's entire communication infrastructure was destroyed in an instant, leaving commanders isolated and unable to coordinate the kind of complex military response Hezbollah had developed over decades of conflict with Israel. Israeli officials maintained their standard policy of neither confirming nor denying responsibility for the attack. Foreign ministry representatives declined to comment on operational matters. Defense Minister Gallant issued a brief statement noting that Israel faces threats from multiple terrorist organizations and will take necessary measures to protect its citizens, without openly mentioning Israeli involvement in the pager operation. Strategic ambiguity served Israel's interests, maintaining plausible deniability while ensuring Hezbollah and its regional sponsors understood exactly who possessed the capability to execute such a sophisticated operation. International reaction was complex and divided. Western governments privately acknowledged the tactical brilliance of the operation while publicly expressing concern over civilian casualties and the precedent of weaponizing consumer electronics. The United Nations called for an investigation into whether the attack violated international humanitarian law, prohibitions on indiscriminate weapons, and booby traps. Human rights organizations condemned what they characterized as a disproportionate attack causing mass casualties without accounting for the presence of civilians in detonation areas. Legal questions were indeed complex. International humanitarian law prohibits weapons that cannot distinguish between combatants and civilians. It prohibits perfidious tactics that abuse protected symbols or civilian infrastructure. But the pager operation existed in a gray area since the devices were distributed specifically to Hezbollah operatives through the organization's internal supply chain. Israeli officials argued that the pagers were effectively military equipment used by the command structure of a terrorist organization, making them legitimate targets under the laws of armed conflict. Critics countered that even targeted operations must minimize harm to civilians, and that detonating explosive devices in populated areas inevitably led to collateral casualties. The 12 civilians killed in the first wave included a young girl who was near her father when his pager detonated and medical personnel treating casualties who were wounded by secondary explosions when additional pagers detonated in hospitals and ambulances. These deaths raised serious questions about whether Israel adequately considered the humanitarian consequences of simultaneous detonations in civilian areas. The strategic impact extended far beyond immediate casualties. Hezbollah's organizational infrastructure was paralyzed. Beyond the dead and wounded, thousands of operatives were psychologically traumatized by the realization that devices they trusted for secure communication were actually weapons that could kill them. The organization faced the enormous challenge of rebuilding its communication network from scratch, knowing any new technology could also be compromised. Regional dynamics immediately shifted. Iran, Hezbollah's primary sponsor, issued harsh condemnation of Israel, but notably did not threaten direct retaliation. Iranian leaders recognized that the operation demonstrated Israeli capabilities that extended to supply chains across the Middle East and Europe, raising awkward questions about whether Iranian military and intelligence infrastructure might also be deeply penetrated. The operation served as a strategic message that Israel could reach its enemies anywhere, by any means, regardless of security measures they adopted. The operation was hailed as a triumph of intelligence and operational planning. While official acknowledgement remained absent, leaks to Israeli media from security sources ensured the public understood Mossad's role in protecting the country from Hezbollah threats. The operation bolstered public confidence in Israeli security forces and delivered political dividends to Prime Minister Netanyahu's government at a time when it faced criticism over handling of the conflict in Gaza and broader security challenges. But intelligence professionals worldwide recognized that the pager operation represented something more significant than a tactical success. It demonstrated the evolution of modern warfare into areas that blur the line between military operations and criminal terrorism. If states can weaponize consumer electronics through supply chain penetration, what prevents similar tactics from being used against civilian populations in future conflicts? What happens when the target of such operations is not a designated terrorist organization, but the civilian infrastructure of a state? The pager attack succeeded because Israeli intelligence executed every stage of an extremely complex operation with near-perfect precision, from initial penetration of Hezbollah's supply chain to technical development of weaponized devices, from manufacturing and distribution logistics to final coordination of simultaneous detonation. The operation required capabilities that only a handful of intelligence services worldwide could even attempt to replicate. The psychological impact was no less devastating. Hezbollah operatives now understood they could trust no technology, no supplier, and potentially no member of their organization who might be compromised by Israeli intelligence. The paranoia this created would hinder operations for years, complicating coordination, slowing decision-making, and forcing the organization to devote enormous resources to counterintelligence and security vetting that would otherwise go towards supporting operational activities. The operation demonstrated Israel's commitment to technological innovation as a force multiplier in asymmetric conflicts. Unable to match its adversaries in numerical superiority, Israel has consistently invested in intelligence capabilities and technological sophistication that allow it to deliver precise strikes against enemies significantly larger than Israeli forces. The pager operation was the latest evolution of this strategy, combining human intelligence, technical engineering, and operational audacity in a way that created strategic effects disproportionate to the resources invested. The method also revealed vulnerabilities in global supply chains that have implications far beyond the Israel-Hezbollah conflict. If Israeli intelligence could compromise pagers destined for Hezbollah, other state and non-state actors could potentially compromise electronics destined for government agencies, military units, or critical infrastructure. The operation opened a new front in global security competition, where trust in commercial supply chains became a national security issue requiring new verification protocols and safeguards. For Hezbollah, the attack represented an intelligence failure of historical scale. The organization implemented what it believed was a secure communication system, only to discover Israeli intelligence had turned that system into a weapon. The failure extended beyond immediate casualties to a fundamental question of how Israeli operatives so thoroughly penetrated Hezbollah's procurement networks that thousands of weaponized devices could be distributed without detection. Internal investigations within Hezbollah will focus on identifying points of compromise in the supply chain and security lapses that allowed weaponized pagers to pass verification protocols. But these investigations face enormous difficulties because the scale of penetration suggested Israeli intelligence did not simply intercept one shipment, but infiltrated so deeply into the supply chain that it could systematically modify devices over extended periods. Discovering all points of compromise would require essentially dismantling and rebuilding the entire procurement infrastructure, a process that would take years, during which Hezbollah remains vulnerable to Israeli intelligence operations. The operation also demonstrated the limitation of technological security measures against adversaries with sufficient resources and patience. Hezbollah adopted pagers specifically to avoid the vulnerabilities of modern smartphones, only to discover that any technology can be weaponized if an adversary can access the supply chain before devices reach their intended users. The lesson was sobering. In an era of global supply chains and sophisticated intelligence operations, no technology is truly secure unless an organization controls every aspect of its production and distribution, a level of self-sufficiency practically impossible for most organizations. The pager attack will be studied in intelligence academies and military colleges for decades as an example of supply chain infiltration, technical innovation, and operational security. It represents a template for how patient, sophisticated intelligence work can create strategic opportunities unmatched by traditional military operations. The operation's success required years of preparation, penetration of international business networks, technical engineering pushing the boundaries of miniaturization and reliability, and operational discipline to maintain secrecy, while hundreds of people contributed to various aspects of the plan without understanding the full picture. For Israel's adversaries, the operation delivered an unambiguous message. Geographic distance provides no protection. Security measures that seem sophisticated can be turned into weapons. Supply chains that appear legitimate can be compromised at levels that make detection nearly impossible. And Israel possesses the capability, resources, and determination to strike at any time, anywhere, by any means necessary to protect its national security interests. Broader implications extend to the future of war and terrorism. If weaponizing consumer electronics through supply chain penetration becomes a standard tactic, international trade will face new security requirements, adding cost and complexity to global commerce. Governments will demand verification protocols for electronics entering critical infrastructure. Armed forces will need to develop new supply chain security measures to ensure their equipment has not been compromised. Intelligence services worldwide will invest in capabilities to replicate what Israel achieved while defending against similar operations targeting their own countries. The pager operation is perhaps the most innovative intelligence operation of the 21st century, an achievement that combined human intelligence, technical engineering, operational security, and strategic timing in a way that created effects far exceeding the physical damage from 3,000 small explosions. It demonstrated that in modern conflict, victory is often achieved not by superiority in firepower, but by superiority in intelligence and a willingness to think creatively about how technology can be transformed from a tool into a weapon. The legacy of the operation will be measured not only by the casualties it caused or the communication networks it destroyed, but by how it changed the calculus of conflict between state and non-state actors. It showed that terrorist organizations cannot insulate themselves from state intelligence capabilities simply by adopting older technologies or implementing stricter security protocols. It demonstrated that patient, sophisticated intelligence work can create opportunities that alter the strategic balance without requiring conventional military forces. And it proved that in the shadow war between Israel and its adversaries, the next attack can come from any direction, by any means, and at any moment. The pagers carried by Hezbollah operatives, believing they were tools of secure communication, became instruments of their own destruction. A perfect symbol of how in modern intelligence warfare, your greatest strength can be turned into your greatest vulnerability by adversaries skilled enough to exploit the trust that makes any technology functional. September 17, 2024, will be remembered as the day Israel demonstrated that in an era of global supply chains and sophisticated intelligence operations, no one is entirely safe, no technology is truly secure, and no organization is beyond the reach of a state determined to strike its enemies wherever they hide. If you found this exploration of covert operations fascinating, please like this video, subscribe for more in-depth analyses, and share it with others who are interested in the hidden dynamics of global security.